What's up, Taiwan? Good morning. I'm Erika Liu with 10 minutes of news from here in Taiwan and around the world. Taiwan has announced new stay-at-home procedures for those with mild COVID symptoms amid its biggest surge of infections to date. The Central Epidemic Command Center says patients will now be allowed to isolate at home instead of at hospitals. A 24-hour emergency care service is accessible via an app, which also can be used to carry out telemedicine appointments with a doctor. Any required medications will be delivered to the patient's home. Daily infection numbers have been rising in recent weeks, and Taiwan's ordered 700,000 units of Pfizer's antiviral COVID-19 pill Paxlovid. The first batch of 350,000 courses will arrive by the end of June. Swedish lawmakers have met senior Taiwan officials at the beginning of a 5-day visit. The European group is the latest to come to Taiwan in the face of protests from China. Their trip is aimed at strengthening the already solid relationship with Sweden. The two sides plan to bolster bilateral investment, in particular industries where Taiwan has global leadership, such as semiconductors. On Monday, they met Taiwan's Economic Minister Wang Meihua and Digital Minister Audrey Tang. The delegation will meet virtually with Taiwan's President Tsai Ing-wen on Tuesday. How will the French election results affect Asia? Our reporter Arnaud Campan spoke to researcher Antoine Bondaz to find out what the results could mean for Taiwan.
I would say there have been two main objectives of President Macron. It was to rebalance trade relations with China and to make sure that China would be much more committed than before in terms of fighting against climate change. These two objectives partly failed because de facto trade imbalances with China has reached an all historic high. But what is very positive on the French side is that we are not shying away from the issues that might anger Beijing. So we are talking much more than before about national security, much more than before about Chinese economic coercion, about Chinese influence campaign, be it in Europe or in France. I would say there is also a Taiwan momentum in France. There is unprecedented media coverage since 2020. The parliamentarians have never been that active on Taiwan, with a resolution being voted both at the National Assembly and at the Senate. And among the political class, there is a growing awareness that there is a huge interest in better cooperating with Taiwan on technical issues, from economic resilience to the fight against cyber interference. And I think that no matter who will be the next president, there is a huge potential for cooperation.
How would a Le Pen win impact France's Indo-Pacific policy, particularly towards Taiwan?
That's the big unknown. To be very honest, there is no mention of China at all in Marine Le Pen's political program, and she has not made any major speeches on international relations, especially on China or on the Indo-Pacific. But we can expect that if Le Pen is focusing much more on sovereignty, on trade protectionism, etc., that it might impact actually China. So it's very hard to tell. I think that even the team of Marine Le Pen is not very aware of what they would do on China.
China is still sending military planes into Taiwan's air defense identification zone. Last year, a total of almost 1,000 aircraft made incursions into the zone. But what exactly is the ADIZ? And why does China keep breaching it? Our reporter Jaime Okan gives us a glimpse into what really takes place in the skies above Taiwan.
At the sound of this alarm, Taiwan scrambles its fighters and deploys missile defense systems. It means Chinese fighter jets have entered Taiwan's Air Defense Identification Zone, or ADIZ. Across the Taiwan Strait, China's ruling Communist Party has maintained the position that Taiwan is not a country and has made it clear that it seeks to unify the island with the mainland. It has not ruled out the use of force.
To put pressure on Taiwan, China frequently sends not just fighter jets, but helicopters, radar planes, and even bombers into this area known as the ADIZ, or Air Defense Identification Zone. Most of the Chinese aircraft enter the southwestern corner near Pratas Island before they circle back. A country's ADIZ serves as a security buffer zone which extends beyond its territorial airspace. Territorial airspace includes anything within 12 nautical miles of a country's land, but areas outside of a country's boundary are classified as international airspace. Gerald Brown, a Washington-based defense analyst, explains that ADIZs didn't exist until after World War II.
The United States established the first one in 1950 and then helped establish several other ones throughout the Indo-Pacific region, namely Philippines, Taiwan, South Korea, and Japan, around 53 if I recall correctly. But largely it's just that buffer to provide that little bit of security benefit. So usually when aircraft are entering, then they are required to identify themselves, file their flight plan before going over entering an air defense identification.
As these identification zones are not bound by international law, there are no common guidelines to define a breach, and so every country has their own protocols. In the East China Sea, South Korea, Japan, China, and Taiwan's ADIZs all overlap. But this doesn't necessarily lead to a scrambling of fighter jets unless an entering aircraft is suspected of having ill intentions or threatens invasion, which is often the concern between China and Taiwan.
Because it's this kind of weird gray area, it can often be used as a form of what we call gray zone warfare, right? Basically putting military pressure on an adversary that's beneath the threshold of conflict. So it's not quite as escalatory as entering a actual territorial airspace, but it is escalatory enough where you can put military pressure on a state without crossing lines.
It's those lines that put Taiwan in a difficult position when enforcing its defense zone. A large portion of Taiwan's ADIZ sits over China, and as the PRC, or People's Republic of China, reinforces its ownership, there are calls for Taiwan to reconsider its ADIZ.
I think there are two meaningless things in this case. One, it doesn't make any sense to establish ADIZ covering mainland, in which Taiwan cannot really control the airspace. Two, as the PRC's airplanes, civilian or military, get into the area frequently without informing Taiwan, and Taiwan does nothing and cannot do anything in response to those or to that. In this case, I think that Taiwan needs to re-establish its ADIZ and set a new system to fit in reality.
With China expected to ramp up its so-called gray zone tactics, Taiwan is looking to minimize the effects on its hardware by shifting to a more advanced missile and tracking system.
I think that's likely the smart move, because that's going to take a lot of pressure off of the Taiwanese Air Force. Constantly scrambling planes to respond, it's just wear and tear on the airframes, right? There's a lot of costs involved in that. There's, it adds up.
However Taiwan responds to Chinese activity, the island is closely watching its ADIZ, determined to better manage its national security and protect its sovereignty. Damon Lin and Jaime Ocon for TaiwanPlus.
Pilgrims are nearing the halfway point of the 9-day trek that is Taiwan's traditional Taoist Dajia Mazu festival. The religious event celebrates the birthday of the sea goddess Mazu. Every year, pilgrims carry her statue through temples in central and southern Taiwan. More than 100,000 people set off at the start of the journey, which will span the cities of Taichung and Jiayi. Numbers are expected to grow, with many others joining the shorter stretches en route. The atmosphere is carnival-like, with fireworks, traditional performances, and plenty of free food. Our reporter James Chater is on the pilgrimage trail in Jiayi.
I'm standing outside one of the around 100 temples that pilgrims will pass through on this 340-kilometer round trip. Some of the people passing by me here will have walked over 100 kilometers in the past 3 days, and they're getting close to their final destination, Xingang Fengtian Temple in Jiayi.
Thank you for watching What's Up Taiwan. I'm Erika Liu. Remember to download the TaiwanPlus app for more stories from Taiwan and around the world. Finally, today, we leave you with some images of cherry blossoms in central Taiwan. Take care and see you next time.